Let's go now to Francesco Rizzuto, Professor of Law at University of East London, and he joins us live from Liverpool in the UK. Francesco, thank you so much for being with us. So Trump has gone from threatening further sanctions if Putin did not agree to a ceasefire to shifting his position to a comprehensive peace settlement that involves Ukraine ceding territory. Do you see any chance of Zelenskyy and the European leaders convincing him otherwise today?
Good evening. Convincing him? No, absolutely not. What is absolutely amazing is to simply compare what Putin wants and what Trump has been trying to put Zelensky under pressure to concede. So, no Crimea, no NATO, give up the Donbass. Obviously, Trump has not also gone along with Putin's suggestion that Russian should be the official language of the Ukraine henceforth. But quite frankly, it's virtually impossible for Zelensky to agree to all of this unless he wants to commit political suicide in the Ukraine. So, frankly, the Europeans are having a meeting with, if you like, Putin in the guise of Trump. And so I really don't see there being some kind of peace treaty immediately after this. I just don't see it, because it would actually mean that the Europeans, as well as the Ukraine, would almost have to surrender and concede defeat on all fronts. And really, I don't actually see that, even though, as your previous correspondent was saying from London, Europe is weak, but it can't continually act like a courtier to an unpredictable prince who really actually is not that unpredictable. He's been pro-Russian on this. He's not played, if you like, a balanced hand. He's not really been a mediator. He has been an advocate of a particular position. And obviously that's not been good for Europe. And this kind of outcome, if I'm correct, will not be good for Europe in the short term at all.
And Francesco, you touched on my next question, which is Zelensky's being in a seemingly impossible position here, as you say, either give up territory in exchange for these security guarantees that involve the US, but it hasn't been very clear on what exactly that would involve, or stand his ground and risk angering Trump. So, I mean, this might be very difficult for you to answer, but what do you think he's going to do?
I think that he is, I think, as I said yesterday, he's caught between a rock and a hard place, whichever way he turns. He clearly wants peace. He clearly wants the killing to stop, but he cannot surrender. It's really very, very difficult for him. What I think may come out of today is a clarification of what America actually means by security guarantees. What does it mean in terms of Article 5 of NATO, especially given that the Ukraine won't go into NATO? If the Europeans can actually, to a certain extent, guarantee the security of the Ukraine without the United States, or with the United States that, frankly, we cannot trust. You know, we've got to be clear about this, and I think the media also has to pick up on this. We've been told blatant untruths throughout this process. I can understand that in war, truth tends to be the first casualty, but this is ridiculous. European leaders, let alone poor old Zelensky, have actually been humiliated within 48 hours of agreeing something with Trump, who then basically reverts back to his pro-Putin position. So Zelensky in a very, very difficult position. I really think that he will not agree to all of this, because to agree to all of this, to the demands that Trump is making, that Putin is making, is really surrender. And I don't think the Europeans can afford to do that. Even the European leaders like Meloni, for example, who tend to be softer on Trump, or of course our own Starmers, who thinks that the best way around this is to act as the sort of courtier to the Mad Prince. I'm not so sure that that works. The Chinese have demonstrated, as have the Brazilians, that sometimes you have to stand up and be counted and actually stand up to madness and actually a destruction of a rules-based order. Of course, rules were always written by the powerful, but these are being torn up. And remember, rules are also there to protect the weak, not just the strong who write them. So, I'm very pessimistic about the outcome tonight, unless the Europeans and the Ukrainians basically surrender to American demands, because we are simply too weak to say no.
And Francesco, one outcome that's been suggested could come of tonight's meeting is a potential trilateral between Washington, Kiev and Moscow. How likely do you think that is? How likely is it, do you think, that Putin would agree to that? What do you think?
I think that Putin will agree to it, because if there is a trilateral, it means that the Ukrainians and the Europeans have basically thrown in the towel. Putin is only going to meet with Zelensky if Zelensky is basically slain, overthrown, finished. Otherwise, what's the point of talking? I mean, frankly, so if there is a trilateral meeting, it is because one side has given up, has been defeated. And it's got to be as stark and as blunt as that. There's no diplomatic way of getting around it, right? Really, there isn't. The Europeans, as I say, just to add, the Europeans may try and press for a ceasefire, but they're delusional. Trump has already made up his mind. He made up his mind a long time ago. And I think his tweets on his own platform, Social Truth, I think it's called, which is a rather interesting way of looking at the world, it's absolutely clear. So on the trilateral, it won't happen if there's not agreement tonight. It will happen if Europe and the Ukraine have basically unconditionally surrendered, because that's what it would be. But please don't misunderstand me. I'm not a warmonger, and as an analyst, and I'm not saying that we should continue the fight and so on. But there are certain principles at stake here. You cannot let the aggressor walk away with his booty. Certainly not in Europe. Our history in Europe has been disastrous because that's happened in the past. And I think Munich in particular is in the minds of most people who understand how these things have worked out. There has to be a rules-based order, and certainly in Europe we have to defend that. And I think we won't be defending that if we basically give up on the poor Ukrainians, and the poor Ukrainians have to basically surrender and give in to Putin. Why? Because I don't think Putin can be trusted, and I don't think Trump can be trusted. That doesn't make our lives in Europe any easier, but I think that's the reality of the situation. So either continue to support the Ukrainians. Europe united, by the way, isn't so sufficient. We certainly lack certain means vis-a-vis what the Americans can provide, but we're not totally useless as long as we actually, as European countries, excluding the Hungarians, of course, but as long as the other 26 plus the UK 27 or 28, plus, of course, the Canadians and the Australians, chart our own path. Keep the Ukrainian army as strong as it possibly can be. Even if there's a ceasefire, by the way, that's another security guarantee that Macron was talking about yesterday that I think has to be maintained. So those are the kind of things that we can do as a Europe if there is the political will to do it. And I actually think that Trump's behavior over the last 5 or 6 days has gone down like a lead balloon in European public opinions. He wasn't that popular in any event. So I don't think we should get too carried away on the internal difficulties that some governments have over budget. The budget's already committed, by the way. So it won't necessarily be the direct, cause immediately budget rises. Everybody's agreed to increase their budgets to 5% for NATO. So I don't see that problem. I think that what Macron was talking about yesterday, and I think others in Europe agree, though, Macron is the bad cop. Starmer is the good cop in all of this. And now apparently there's this star chap from Finland who plays golf with Trump. I mean, if you think about it, yesterday I was talking about, it reminds me of either the history of the Roman Empire, when we had completely mad emperors and everybody was afraid to tell them the truth in case they got killed, or mad kings in the Middle Ages, when all the courtiers knew he was mad, but were running around trying to please and persuade him. I thought we'd moved on from all of that, but quite clearly we appear not to.
So Francesco, sorry. I just want to ask you one more question. We're watching the arrival of the European leaders right now live on our screens. What is on the line here for the European leaders? And if they do, as you predict may happen, just relinquish to Putin and Trump's demands about Ukraine ceding territory, what does that mean for the future of the transatlantic relationship and for Europe itself?
I think that in the short term, what that means is that Europe will become a collection of vassal states to the United States. That's in the short to medium term of the next 3 to 5 years, for as long as you notice the Freudian slips, interchangeable, Putin-Trump. I think it would be a disaster for us, frankly. We could no longer rely on the United States. We would have Mr. Putin, who clearly thinks that not that he ever thought that rules applied to him anyway. It would really be quite disastrous for Europe. It would mean that we had succumbed to a world of certainly two predators, though we can include the Chinese in this, and perhaps one or two others, though their bites are not quite that, their appetites are not quite that large anymore. So I think it's very, very important that Europe today stays united, that it supports the Ukrainians, because it's actually supporting ourselves. And if things go the way you mentioned, in other words, we give in, then I think we need to basically work very, very quickly to try and regain our autonomy. Remember, the United States under Trump and Putin hate the European Union, want a divided Europe. So make no mistake about that. So the pressure on Europeans through the next 3 to 5 years, if we don't succeed in, if you like, changing the mind of a slightly eccentric emperor, not to call him mad, then I think it's not going to be great for the Europeans. I think that, and it's not going to be great globally. Why? Because it means that international rules, as I mentioned before, don't matter anymore. Who feels they have the strength and who have the appetite would simply go ahead and take what they want and what their strength permits. Europeans are fully aware of this. So I do hope that I'm wrong. I do hope that however it's dressed up, the Europeans stand firm, maintain their position, and do all they can in order to prepare themselves for what I've called, and what others have called, a degree of European sovereignty in what matters, sadly, in the world of today, and that is strength, economic, military, in order to be able to support your value systems. Because without that, essentially, you're going to be victim to unpredictable princes or mad dictators.
And on that note, Francesco Rizzuto, Professor of Law at University of East London, thank you so much for your time and your analysis with us here on TRT World.